YouTube. You guys want city transparency. YouTube started, the voices end at 1:48 and 35 seconds. 1 hour, 48 minutes and 35 seconds when the voices stopped on the YouTube, and the video stopped 5 seconds later. And at 1:53 and 38 seconds, you start to hear the voices, and then at 1:53:41, the video started. There's a missing 5 minutes and 6 seconds of that YouTube that the citizens need to know about. From what it started at the beginning, I mean, that's what instigated that. I don't know why that was taken out of there, but a YouTube channel rolled. So you can go ahead and now say, yeah, I'm a liar, or you can call me a moron. Because I sat up there, and you don't remember that the previous mayor, it was a game that we played to sit there and not pass what he wanted. Because he thought he was up above us, and when he found out the organizational chart is that you work for these four and these four people. You are directed by them what to send down to the administrator and take care of business within the city. So remember, they don't answer to you. You answer to the council members itself. So I've said my point. I'm going to leave everything else alone. But don't you ever call me a liar, because that's what you told.
No, you lied.
Okay. Why did you tell me that you were the owner of McDonald's?
I'm not.
You said it.
I run them.
So
do you
that
want...
means you are a liar too. So congratulations. I tell you, your grandmother and grandfather that lived next to me as a kid is probably rolling over in their grave thinking, what the heck is my grandson doing? So that is it. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is staff reports. We'll start with the finance director.
Good evening. This year's flown by. I can't believe it's nearly the end of October. In light of the fact that we are still in COVID, over a year and a half after the pandemic started, tonight I'm going to update you on the same revenue streams that I have in the last couple of finance reports, and also touch base on some additional items that I think might be of interest to you. In my last report, I expressed optimism that collections would likely be increasing as things opened up again. Unfortunately, as we all know, although there are events happening around us that didn't a year ago, such as Park City's having festivals, there's the Riverfest and others in the area, we aren't back to normal due to the Delta variant. I guess that's what I get for expressing optimism. Sales tax. Our year-to-date collections through October this year are $1,394,000, which is an increase of $141,000 over the same time frame last year. We already exceeded our 2021 budgeted amount of $1,289,000. In 2020, our total collections for the full year were $1,503,000, and will easily surpass that this year. Tax distributions. In general, I'm referring to the property taxes, motor vehicle taxes, watercraft taxes, special assessments, and in lieu of payments. We've received 4 of the 6 tax distributions so far this year, with the remaining 2 being very small comparatively. We have received $5,775,000 to date this year, as compared to $5,610,000 for the same time frame last year, which is an increase of $165,000. While that may sound good, it actually isn't good enough. We had a 7.36% increase in our assessed value that funded the 2020 budget over the assessed value that is funding the 2021 budget. So our budgeted tax collections are that much higher this year. Although we've had an increase in this year's collections as compared to last year, it has not been 7.36%. It's been more like 3%. We would need to receive a 60% increase in the last 2 tax distributions this year to meet our budget, and it's highly unlikely that's going to happen. If I project the final 2 payments with a 3% increase over last year's, our total collections for this year will be $185,000 short of the budget. Fortunately, our sales tax collections for the year will easily come in high enough to cover the shortfall. Franchise fees. Collections through the end of September this year are $540,500, as compared to $517,900 for the same time period last year, which is an increase of $22,600. Gas tax. These payments are quarterly, and we receive them from both the state and the county, but the time period for those quarters are different. We've received all 4 quarters of the state payments and 3 quarters of the county payments. The 2021 year-to-date collections from both the state and the county exceed 2020's same time period by $34,370 and pre-COVID 2019's by $20,475, so that's very positive. It's important to know, though, that these amounts also include a special distribution from the state of $17,256 because there were additional funds left in the state highway fund at the end of their fiscal year. That's not normal. But even if you deduct that amount to be apples to apples for comparison purposes, 2021's collections will still exceed both 2020's and 2019's collections for the same time period. We will be receiving the county's payment for the last quarter in just a few days, so hopefully once that payment is received, the total of the state and county payments combined will continue to exceed those of the past 2 years. Interest income, big groan. In 2019, pre-COVID, the city received interest income totaling $246,000. In 2020, we received $35,500. In 2021, year-to-date, we've received only $2,216. KMIP started out the year at 0.01% and dropped to 0.005% in mid-March, then dropped to 0.002% near the end of May, and that's where we remain now. We currently have $20 million in that account after closing on the bond and temp note. Our Emprise account has earned 0.07% all year, but as I previously reported to you, we're no longer able to keep more than $5 million in that account. Our bond and temp note closing provided us over $5 million alone without consideration of the amounts that were already in the account. And it was a bit of an ordeal to get more money pledged to cover those proceeds during the time period it takes to move the money from Emprise to KMIP, because that is a lengthy process. Councilmember Bailey is going to provide me with some information that would allow the city to begin investing directly in U.S. Treasuries and other allowable investments in order to increase our interest income. I think that might be a little bit of a process, so it'll be a little bit, I think, before that probably can happen. Transient Guest Tax. In 2019, the city received transient guest tax revenue of $259,200. And in 2020, it dropped to $217,100. In 2021, we've received 3 quarterly distributions totaling $190,200, which is $23,400 more than we received for the first 3 quarters of last year. So that's some good news. However, each of the quarterly payments for this particular revenue stream do fluctuate a lot from one year to the next, so it's not necessarily a given that we'll end up the year with more than last year. These payments fund the Convention and Tourism Fund, which still has a healthy unencumbered cash balance of over $500,000, $500,000, so we should be okay there. Liquor tax. This is interesting. In 2019, pre-COVID, we received $60,000. In 2020, despite the fact that everybody said everybody's buying alcohol, our collections dropped to $44,000. We've only received the first 3 quarterly payments for 2021, but we've already exceeded 2020 at $46,164. I'm not sure what happened for the 3rd quarter payment, but just under $29,000. It's the highest we've received in all the years since we installed Encode in 2011. A few additional items I thought might be of interest to you. The first item is the ARPA funds, federal grants in general, and the uniform grant guidance. When an entity spends, not receives, but spends at least $750,000 in federal funds in a year, they are required to have a single audit. A single audit is basically an auditor reviewing how an organization has managed their federal grant award as well, to make sure they are in compliance with all the rules and regulations of each grant award, as well as in compliance with the Uniform Grant Guidance. The UGG, as I'll call it, was initially implemented near the end of 2014, and it's a set of uniform rules and regulations about federal grants from the Office of Management and Budget. I've printed the UGG, and it's 263 pages of extremely detailed information. For a recipient to be able to spend the federal ARPA funds, it is required that their purchasing policy be in conformance with the Uniform Grant Guidance. Park City's current policy has one sentence that indicated it is our intent to fully comply with applicable law and grant requirement policies. I don't feel that sentence would pass muster, and I certainly don't feel it gives department heads any type of understanding of the federal UGG requirements that they must follow when spending those federal funds. I've therefore been working on a new purchasing policy that I'll bring to council once it's complete. I previously reported to you that the estimated amount of ARPA funds Park City was to receive was $1,086,898. The final allocation was actually a little higher at $1,177,850. That's about $91,000 more than the estimate. The ARPA funds are being provided to cities in two tranches that are 1 year apart, and our first half of $588,925 was received on July 9th. Yesterday, we received notice from the Kansas Office of Recovery that in a few days we'll be receiving 50% of an additional $7,007 that has been awarded to us. The second half will be included in our second tranche next year. Park City is a non-entitlement unit, an NEU, which means our population is less than 50,000. The reason we received the additional 7,000 allocation is because some other NEUs either decided their awards, declined their awards, or were non-responsive in requesting their funds. So the total of their amounts have been reallocated to the rest of the NEUs based proportionately on population. The next item I'd like to update you on is the utility account write-offs and sending debts to the State of Kansas set-off program for collection. To refresh your memories, last December I informed you that I had previously become aware that Park City had not written off balances on utility accounts that were billed after 2014, and that unpaid accounts that were billed after 2013 had not been submitted to the State of Kansas set-off program for collection. At that point, staff had started sending the required notices to customers so we'd be able to send them to the set-off program, and we had written off the 2015 and 2016 debts, which, if you recall, takes them out of accounts receivable and places them in a bad debt section of Encode. They don't just go away. At the time of my report, we were getting ready to start creating batches to send to the set-off program. So what has happened since then? Staff has provided the 3 notices related to all unpaid accounts that were finalized during all the years through May of this year. 2 of the 3 notices have been provided on accounts that were finalized in June of this year, and we still need to send 2 more notices on unpaid accounts that were finalized in the months of July through the current date. Staff has sent unpaid debts to the set-off program for the years 2014 through 2016, and as of yesterday, we've collected $9,770 from the set-off this year. Debts for year 2017 through 2020 are ready to be written off and moved to the bad debt section of Encode. I'll bring those write-off amounts to you to approve a little closer to the end of the year. After that, staff will start sending those debts to the set-off program also. Something else that came to my attention in all this is that for some unknown reason, the payments received since 2012 from the set-off program were being applied to liability accounts rather than to the individual customer debts. Staff is currently working on posting those payments to the debts, and that project is almost complete. The last item I have is budget amendments. I've asked a couple staff members to project their 2021 expenditures through the end of the year in order to determine if a budget amendment is needed. If an amendment is needed, which is likely, our plan is to send the notice of hearing to the Ark Valley News by noon, November 30th for the December 2nd publication. The public hearing and adoption would then be held during the December 14th City Council meeting. That's the end of my report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Randy?
Have we started seeing any payments come in from the casino?
Yes, we've received our second payment.
And what was the Do you recall what the payment was?
I think it was the amount in the agreement. I need to double check that to be sure. I got that, checked that email when I was on my week of vacation, and I haven't yet gone back and double checked it.
In future going forward, when you give your reports, will you include the revenue that we've collected?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Dee? Not seeing any. Thanks, Dee. Next item on the agenda is City Administrator. Sean?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First of all, 77th Street Roundabout is near complete, and by that, what I mean is street lights were installed over the past couple of days. A walkthrough was conducted this afternoon, which created a short punch list. That punch list will be completed by tomorrow afternoon, and so it will be officially open to all traffic starting at 5:00 p.m. tomorrow night. Again, special recognition and thanks to the Kansas Department of Transportation, Sedgwick County, Valley Center for partnering with Park City on this project. As a reminder to our citizens, as well as those traveling through our city, the council recently approved reducing the speed limits north of the roundabout from 55 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour, starting adjacent to the Saddlebrook neighborhood. As with many things, those signs are on back order and should arrive and be installed either by the end of this week or next week at the latest. Speaking of improvements, Council, there are pictures up on the screen. Public Works just completed the 2021 road improvement plan, which included a mill and overlay of Randall between Gary and Fairchild, as well as Burlington between Upchurch and Poston. A 10-inch cement slurry base treatment, along with a new 6-inch road surface on Robbins between Grove and Ulysses between Fairchild and Robbins. A slurry seal on Denver and Evanston between West Parkview and East Parkview, and Upchurch between 61st and Evanston. And then finally, a single pass scrub chip seal on Irving between 49th and 51st Streets, and Wichita between 53rd and the southern ending point. Additionally, the Streets Department has been out crack sealing and has recently completed the entire neighborhood of Prairie Hills and is now working on Primrose. And other things as far as infrastructure, the 53rd Street lift station will start construction next week, and it's expected to be completed in mid-December. Other notes is 2 weekends ago, we had the Shred Day. It was a great success here at City Administration Center. 71 residents participated and totaled just under 3,300 pounds worth of paper shredded. And then finally, there is a memo or letter to each of you on the dais this evening regarding premium pay. Staff is still compiling information for presentation at the next meeting, but we wanted to get you the background information, what Sedgwick County has recently approved, and the various options being researched so the council has, one, time to look it over, and if there are any special requests or additional information needed or other options that the council would like staff to consider, to please let us know sometime this next week. Sir, that's all I have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Sean? Not seeing any. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Brandy
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
and Jim? I second that. Got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes 8-0. That next item under new business is item 4, which is discuss the downtown district request for qualification.
Yes, sir. In August, the city advertised RFQ 2021-001, seeking to partner with an experienced development team to develop a downtown district on the city-owned property adjacent to the City Administration Center. RFQ submissions are due no later than November 19th, at which time it indicates that the city will evaluate all the submittals based on their qualifications, financial capacity, references, capacity to perform the work, and ultimately their proposed concept. The RFQ outlines that city staff will evaluate the submittals, and then they may invite consultants and representatives from other qualified organizations to evaluate the submittals as deemed necessary. Due to the importance and substantial impact of this project will have on the community, staff believes it would be very beneficial to have at least 2 or 3 council members participate in that selection process. Additionally, if there are any Park City residents that due to their background, their chosen profession, or specialized expertise, that could add value to the selection process, staff again would welcome those recommendations as well.
Brandy?
I just want to throw out there that I would like to be a part of this committee. So,
Ben?
So, yeah, I think this is a great plan. Thank you guys for all the work going into the RFQ, into this process. It's been a nice, long road getting to where we're at. Obviously, there'll probably be a few of us that want to be on, or would at least have interest in being on this, and so I'm sure we'll get to that once we get to that point. But I do just want to say thank you to you all, to Russ and everybody in planning, and then our Planning and Zoning Commission working through this as well. So with that, if there's nothing else, I'd go ahead and make a motion that we receive and file.
Tom?
I was just going to say I'd volunteer to be on the committee too.
Excuse me, I'd have interest too, but I would second the motion.
Not seeing any other comments? John?
I guess I'm confused, unless I'm on the wrong item here. I thought are we motion to approve or just receive and file?
I don't know what there is to approve.
What I was hoping for is if there are 2 or 3 council members, we can have more council members as well. If there are those that want to be, welcome everybody's participation in this because of the significance to the city, so.
We're
Okay.
looking for
So
people
we're
that want
wanting-
to be a part
okay.
of that.
I was not clear that we're wanting to create our committee
Apologize.
right now.
Yep.
I will go ahead and rescind my motion.
Okay, Jen?
I as well.
Okay. Brandy?
I guess I'll hold off in a second. I was going to make a motion to add to the committee, but I'll wait to hear what everybody else has to say.
John?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to clear it out.
You what?
I was pressing cancel, not, yeah,
okay.
from the last.
Ben?
So can we get an idea of who all wants to be on this? That might be a good idea to see. I know we have 4 that have expressed interest then, I think is what I've counted so far. And that's probably without having, I mean, granted, I'm not saying that it's not open to public. What I'm saying though is that if we get more than 4, then it is an open meeting requirement, correct? At that point,
That
we
is
have
correct.
a quorum.
That is correct.
So 4 would be the maximum. Are there others other than the 4 mentioned that are interested in being involved?
Brandy?
Who's the 4? I only heard 3. Are you the 4th?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well then, okay.
George?
Yeah, since you have 4, I'd also be interested in it, but since you have your 4, I'll decline it.
Brandy?
Then I'll make a motion that Ben, Tom, myself, and Jim are part of the Downtown District Committee.
And John?
Second.
Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 8-0. That brings us to item 5, which is discuss and consider approval of the text amendment to the zoning regulations of the city of Perth to increase the maximum building height. Go ahead, Russ.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. 2 quick text amendments to our zoning regulations. The first one is fairly straightforward. If you recall, about June of 2020, we brought 2 text amendments to change the maximum building height of the C2 district from 35 feet to 50 feet and the I1 district from 35 feet to 80 feet in preparation of some recent construction projects. It was also brought to staff's attention that the I2 zoning district also limited the maximum height to 35 feet, which is clearly in violation. There's many buildings in the I2 zoning district that would be non-conforming. So we're bringing that kind of a cleanup item in front of you this evening. So we are seeking a height increase in the I-2 heavy industrial district from 35 feet to 80 feet to match the I-1 light industrial district. And I'll stand for any questions.
Ben?
Seems pretty straightforward, so I go ahead and make a motion to approve the text amendments as presented.
George?
Well, I'd second that for discussion, but I do have a question. I know up until a few years ago, with all the drought and stuff, you could drive a sand point down and hit water. How much weight could a person possibly put in a building with the ground the way it is around here? Because I know we sit on top of that aquifer, and I'm not sure what kind of base is under there. Does anybody know?
Certainly. So whenever you would have a structure, an industrial or commercial structure, it's a different section of the building code, and I'm speaking a little bit out of my purview here, but just in my experience with an engineering company, those plans must be stamped and certified as far as their spread footings go for the structural bearing of that building. So whether a building is 25 feet, 80 feet, or 120 feet, engineering plans are submitted to the city for approval prior to building permit, and they have to illustrate when they are putting together their construction plans, they will hire an environmental assessment team to go do borings, soil borings. They'll produce a report. That report gets sent to the structural engineer, the architectural engineer, as well as the architects, and they will design the appropriate footings for that bearing load.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Ben?
Sorry, for clarification, do I need to make the motion to approve the ordinance? I just looked at the top part. Doug, do you know?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion then to approve ordinance 1134-2021, an ordinance amending Article 5, off-street parking and loading of the zoning regulations of the city of Park City, Kansas.
Article 4.
Sorry, 1133, I had to scroll down, Article 4, zoning districts of the zoning regulations of the city of Park City, Kansas, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Got a motion and a second. Not in any further discussion. Marla, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Aye.
George Glover. Ben Sosetta.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Brandy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye. That ordinance passes 8-0. That brings us to item 6, which is discuss and consider approval of text amendment to the zoning regulations of the city of Park City to create the D downtown district. Russ?
Thank you. So this is less simple. We are in the process of creating a new zoning district, so the text in this article will be new. But in summary, it tries to capture the implementation strategies of the recently approved downtown master plan for the 48-acre city-owned tract here behind City Hall. As part of the implementation strategy, it was suggested we create a unique zoning district to guide the development of that property. Sean just mentioned the RFQ that's going out to solicit potential designers and developers of that project. This will help guide them in their design. The hallmarks, the new chapter is approximately 7 pages in length. It has the standard base zoning district information, the permitted uses, the uses that are held as special or conditional uses, as well as the bulk regulations. The hallmark of this particular zoning district is that it introduces development standards specific to this property that are a little bit more specific and to the point and a little bit better articulated than other standards in the zoning code. It also provides a site plan review process that is unique to our zoning regulations. So whenever a project within that downtown district seeks a development approval for a building permit, they will be subject to making an application with the Planning Commission, who will review the project to see its conformity with the development standards. And then that recommendation will be brought to the city council for final approval. So it's a two-step site plan review process, which is novel. The planning commission will have a public hearing on that particular design, and the city council will obviously then have final authority over that design. The chapter does build in several abilities for several modifications to the standards. What we want to see and what the downtown master plan seeks is for innovative design with flexibility in land use mixing. And so we feel like we've crafted a chapter here that will further that plan, as well as provide the city kind of the ultimate level of overview of any and all development projects within that district. Like I said, it's fairly lengthy. If there's specific questions that you would have over the elements of the district, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those. Otherwise, I'll stand for any other questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks, Russ.
Mm-hmm.
Randy?
I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate you guys adding the development standards in this, and then specifically talking about the exteriors and making sure that they're all uniform. So with that, I'll make a motion to.
Excuse me, there's a mistake in the suggested motion, so.
Okay.
Could I read you something, and then maybe you could say it like that? That's probably the easiest way to do it. The motion should be to approve ordinance 1134, 2021, an ordinance amending Article 4 of the zoning regulations of the city establishing a downtown district, DD downtown district.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 1134-2021, an ordinance amending Article 4 of the zoning regulations of this zoning regulations for the downtown district for the city of Park City, Kansas.
John?
Second.
Tom?
I was going to second it.
Got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Marla, would you call the roll?
John Lanier,
Aye.
George Glover,
Aye.
Ben Sosetta,
Aye.
Melvin Kerr,
Aye.
Tom Jones,
Aye.
George Capps,
Aye.
Brandy Bailey,
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that ordinance passes 8-0. That brings us to item 7, which is consider approval and master service agreement for the advisory services to assist in the process of purchasing new ERP software. Dee?
Council has directed staff to purchase new software to replace the Encode 9 software. As mentioned during the 2022 budget process, the budget workshop, assistance is needed with a large workload related to that process. Staff has received the following proposals from Baker Tilly and the Government Finance Officers Association. Baker Tilly's proposal is $173,450 plus project-related expenses, for example, travel, per diem, delivery charges, plus cost of any unique or complex issue. GFOA's proposal is $137,500. Councilmember Salcedo asked me why we have only 2 quotes. There were a few reasons for that. First, I'd like to explain how we became aware that these 2 entities provide software advisory services. I knew Tom Calico and Ben Hart from their prior positions, and they are now with Baker Tilly. Tom was previously the financial advisor at Springstead that the city manager and I hired in El Dorado. He was very good at what he did. I didn't know Ben quite as well, but he was previously a well-respected city manager, and then he later went to work for accounting firm Allen Gibson Hulick in Wichita, and in that role, he was a presenter at some training sessions that I attended. One day, Tom and Ben were in the area and stopped by to see me. They mentioned several companies had merged into Baker Tilly, so they had a vast knowledge base to pull from to be able to provide assistance to cities in a number of ways. Since we have so much going on in Park City, Sean, Dan, and I asked them to meet with us to let us know what types of services they provide. And that's how we learned of their software consulting services. We later held a Zoom meeting with additional Baker Tilly staff to go into greater depth, and as it turned out, one of those people was the managing director, who Sean knows very well. As for GFOA, I'm on the Kansas Government Finance Officers Association listserv, and before you directed me to buy software, I had seen a couple positive comments about GFOA software advisory services. Although I've never used GFOA for software advisory services before, I have used them for many of their training sessions. I can personally attest to the fact that they are a very high-quality organization. They provide the best training I get anywhere. I need CPA to be able to maintain my certified public accountant's license, and not just any training will qualify for CPE. They must be approved to be able to do so, and Kansas CPA takes that very seriously in order to maintain the integrity of the profession. So that's how we became aware of them. As for why we did not send out a request for qualifications, there's a few reasons. Karen Kendall, the finance director of Edgerton, was one of the cities that recommended GFOA on the listserv I mentioned. So I called her. She gave a very high recommendation for GFOA. She said she initially contacted GFOA to find out companies to provide software advisory services in order to send out an RFQ. Keep in mind that GFOA is a nonprofit organization that does not have a profit motive. They exist to help government entities. She said most of the companies did not specialize in government. She said a California firm appeared to have some previous government experience, but they did not respond to the RFQ. She said they received quotes from GFOA and High Tech Technologies in Wichita, but High Touch had no government experience. She said they interviewed both, and in her words, GFOA was hands down better. Another reason we did not send out RFQs is none of us have used software advisory services before, so speaking at least for myself, I would not have had any idea what to put in the RFQ. For whatever reason, I've not seen an RFP or RFQ related to software or software advisory services shared on the Kansas GFOA listserv. We may have been able to borrow Karen Kendall's and adjust it to suit Park City, but my impression from talking to her was the process was a complete waste of time. This leads me, finding time, to the last reason. We're trying to expedite the process. Council directed us to purchase and install new software in 2022. If we can get started with the process this year, GFOA can be doing work in the first quarter of 2022 that doesn't involve much of my time, and that's a tremendously busy time of year for me. Sean and I have visited about this, and given our internal knowledge, or lack of knowledge, I should say, with software advisory services, we feel taking the time to prepare a quality RFP or RFQ would set us back several months. However, we can certainly back up and do that if council prefers us to do so. GFOA and Baker Tilly are both reputable vendors. As I mentioned, GFOA is a nonprofit organization, so it does not have the profit motive. Each of the vendors included an estimate of the cost of an implementation phase in their proposal that was included in the amounts quoted. Both vendors bill that phase based on an hourly rate, and both have indicated the number of hours that will actually be needed is based on the needs of each specific city. Park City's needs are not yet known to them. Staff recommends GFOA's proposal due to the lower overall cost. GFOA will assist in planning the project, developing the RFP, determining the software vendors, analyzing our processes and making recommendations for improvements, reviewing vendor responses and assisting in selection, contract negotiations, and implementation. GFOA has indicated the typical cost of the implementation phase for a city our size ranges from $40,000 to $75,000. So their proposal included a not-to-exceed amount of $75,000 for that phase. GFOA believes the RFP for software can be developed prior to the end of 2021, and implementation of the software is tentatively planned for the last quarter of 2022. Please be aware, we as staff also will be busy working on the various steps with GFOA during that year. As an example, Sean, Dan, and I feel strongly that our processes need to be analyzed for improvements. GFOA can't do that without talking to staff about our current processes. In order to avoid a cash basis violation for this project, there must be enough cash in the project to cover the expenditures, which includes any encumbrances. During the 2022 budget process, council approved staff's recommendation to use a $300,000 increase in the general fund's 2020 unencumbered cash balance for software costs. The software services are approved by council. Staff recommends making the $300,000 transfer this year rather than in 2022. Since that cash is already available, and the city is now annually budgeting the full general fund unencumbered cash balance to avoid the issues we were previously having with the state budget forms, there would be no financial repercussion of making the transfer now rather than in 2022. I stand for questions.
Nobody from council has any questions, so Kyle signed up to speak. Kyle?
So I want to start by commending your staff for identifying a need and working towards implementing an updated ERP system. As someone who has recently gone through the procurement process and implementation of such a system, I understand firsthand its necessity and how daunting of a task it can be. That being said, the importance of a project should never be placed ahead of the importance of fiscal responsibility. The proposal that is being recommended for approval has a not-to-exceed price tag of $137,500 for various professional services throughout the project. We've already recognized that there was no formal solicitation made. This means that there was no competitive nature in which these proposals were obtained, nor was there a uniform specification identifying the proposed services needed. Not only does this go against your current city procurement policy, 930-2016, that states that purchases in the excess of $10,000 must be procured by means of formal sealed bids, in this case requiring an RFQ or RFP due to being professional services. But if approved, it also leaves room for conflict of interest, as the verbiage of the current proposal per selected firm states that they would assist in the selection of contract negotiation of the selected ERP firm. I understand having subject matter experts as outside non-voting members of a selection committee for a knowledge base, but I would never imagine allowing them to have authority in selecting or negotiating a contract on our behalf. We have competent staff who can handle those duties. Instead of moving forward and utilizing what you have before you as a means to a solution, utilize it to build a budget for the project, identify a uniform specification for the release of a formal solicitation for ERP consulting project management per your policy. Use that firm along with staff to identify areas of inefficiencies, and if more information were required as to what ERP systems are available that would meet your needs, issue a request for information and obtain submittals from companies. Those submittals have no contractual agreements as they were part of an RFI. Then utilize that information to develop your request for proposal for an ERP system. Most companies provide an implementation team as part of the proposed pricing, so utilize them in lieu of a project manager. The project manager should be there only as a means to protect the city's needs. As stated previously, I am in favor of the city taking necessary steps to update an outdated system. However, it should be done per policy and with fiscal responsibility. If you need things, the City of Wichita has just recently implemented their ERP system. We would be happy to share that RFP with you. There are other outlets out there, NIGP, the National Institute of Government Professionals, the Kansas Association for Public Procurement Professionals. You have a depth of knowledge here. Use it. Thank you.
John?
I would just guess I'd like to hear a staff response to that. I mean, what directionally, I mean, what if we do what Kyle mentioned, how much will this hold us back?
I'm not really certain that it would hold us back. It would just delay the process, no doubt about it. There are 6 different steps that I think that he outlined, 6 different steps that neither Dee nor I have been through the process before. As she had mentioned in her finance report earlier tonight, the procurement policy that we have for the city is outdated at times, contradicts itself at times, and we're trying to implement revise that policy to make certain that it fits more what we do on a day-to-day basis. It is a policy, it is something for us to follow, or at least make council made aware of. Most of the time when we come before council, like later on tonight when we're talking about something, we usually have 3 bids, depending on the dollar amount. There are some times where there's sole source contractors that getting 3 bids becomes problematic. There are times where we've reached out to more than a dozen and we only get maybe 1 or 2 bids back. The thing is, what we try to do is ensure that every time we make these recommendations to the council, that they're well aware of what efforts were obtained to try and do that. In this particular case, if, as Dee had mentioned, if council would like us to throttle back, take a little bit slower step and go through these individual processes, again, I can't speak for Dee, but I don't have any exposure to those, so it'd be a matter of us researching, finding out these other organizations. It's similar to what we did on the RFQ process for the downtown development. Me being only here for the last 2.5 years, I don't know who all the key players are within the state. So I reached out to a whole bunch and said, please tell me, where do I send it to? And it was done by word of mouth as far as where we should be sending these. Did I include everybody possible? Probably not, because I just don't know what I don't know, so.
And we just wondered if the city attorney would want to weigh in on this at all.
In what way?
Just the bidding process, and I mean, as far
This
as
is professional services. There's no obligation under state law to do any bidding, no obligation under law to do anything different than what Dee has done. To the extent that this doesn't jive with the existing purchasing policy, it's a policy. You can, given explanations and your understanding of the situation, choose to ignore the policy and go forward with the proposal in front of you. You could go direct staff to go back and start over again, start with the City of Wichita's RFQ and see if that's appropriate. You're the bosses.
thank you.
Tom?
In light of the information that we were giving by the individual, I would like to maybe make a motion that we defer this for 2 weeks and give Dee an opportunity and Sean an opportunity to pursue that. If nothing comes back, then we come back with this. I opened up this packet and looked at it, and what was submitted is what the vendors submitted. GFOA, I saw nothing wrong with it, but I didn't see anything in there where we asked for anything, so.
And that was kind of my point. Well, one of the reasons
And
we
I know
didn't do
you
the
were talking
RFQ,
to
we
that,
didn't
but-
really know what we were asking for.
Right.
We don't have experience in this at all.
And
Anywhere
I
on
don't,
our
are we
staff.
looking at a total ERP system, or are we looking at fixing wires, or, I mean,
Sean had talked to Baker Tilly about doing several things that are listed on the first page of theirs, looking at what we have to see if we just need trained.
okay.
Looking at Encode 10, upgrade, still Encode, or going to something completely different, so.
If this isn't something that we have to do right now, I'd like to take a 2-week break and have staff look at the options and then bring it back. If there's nothing there, then we're okay, but we've been offered something tonight we haven't had in the past. Maybe we need to look at that. And like I said, I would make a motion to do that, if I can get a second, which is a deferment of 2 weeks.
Brandy?
I just want to say, being a finance professional, I know GFOA is who we reach out to for a lot of our advice in the government world. And when we do our audits, we submit those to GFOA to review them. So I feel like if with GFOA being the advisor to us, they would help us probably better than anybody else, because they're going to review our stuff, so they're going to make sure that we have what we need and that our information that we're transferring over or the information we want to put into a system is accurate. And so I would want to make a motion to approve this contract, but I know there's a motion on the floor.
George?
I
I will withdraw my motion.
I'm not into software. That ERP, is that an acronym?
Yeah, it's basically
What's that mean?
enterprise resource planning. It's kind of the way everybody refers to. It's basically an entire package of software that talks to each other. So instead of having packages that don't translate data, to each other, your double entry and so forth. So all of the software would talk to each other.
Well, I'd still be interested in hearing, seeing what Wichita did. We're talking about 437,000 if I look at that right. That's a lot of money. I don't think it would hurt to talk to them. What would we lose? We might save our citizens a bunch of money.
Tom?
I don't have anything to add right now.
Randy?
Tom removed his motion, so I'll move to approve GFOA's master service agreement and advisory service proposal statement of work related to the purchase of ERP software in the amount not to exceed $137,500 to be paid from the Capital Projects Fund, and also approve a transfer of $300,000 in 2021 from the general fund to the Capital Projects Fund for the purpose of funding the costs of the ERP software project.
Melman?
I'll second that for discussion there. I think we need to back up there and get some advice from some of the other people and see if we can get a little cheaper or get another request or something from it, so.
Ben?
So I guess between, Tom had mentioned 2 weeks. It seems like what the issue is a bigger than 2-week ordeal, if I understand staff correctly, is 2 weeks isn't gonna give you enough time to really get anything put together of substance. Sorry, I can't talk right now very well, so I apologize. So I don't know what 2 weeks would necessarily do. Is George mentioned the $437,000 up to that we're looking at this possible point. We talked about wanting to get ready by 2022. Is the pressure to get that done by 2022 and implemented maybe causing some of the push to move forward right now in a way that if we said, you know what, it was an ideal to have by 2022, but if we had it by 2023, let's just say, and we got the opportunity to process through, and I know the concern is right now is that, and it's hard, right? Neither of you have ever had experience in this facet of it. But if we remove the time crunch of implementation, would that allow you the opportunity to grow? And just to further that, broaden that, I don't want to say educational scope, but just that part, because we don't know how long this could last for. Obviously, the goal is to get an ERP system that will last for a long time. But if, let's say 7, 8 years from now, we're back in the same position, could taking the little bit of time, or the extra time, I don't say little, I don't want to say that, but the extra time also further a skill set that could be necessary down the road. Obviously, utilizing them could also do that as well. Obviously, if you are working alongside of them, they would also be able to provide that that growth too. So I understand that. I just wonder is if I appreciate the need and everything coming forward tonight as far as getting it done so we can keep on progress with hit by 2022. But is it a desperate need that we have implementation done by 2022?
That was direction of council, so we could definitely push that out. I would say I think it's going to probably take quite a bit of time to change documents from Sedgwick County size to Park City size. I think that will take a lot of staff time to do that. So yes, I do think that would push us out quite a ways, so that's up to council.
And you mentioned, though, that you didn't think that implementation would be towards the end of 2022 anyway. So it really wouldn't be go live probably till 23 at some point.
I would say probably so, and I will tell you, I'm going to be one of the main people in this process, and I can tell you what time of year I have time, and time to, you know, for staff to be training and be buried in the middle of learning these processes and doing the entry that it takes to make sure everything's coming out right and everything, and that's the end of the year is where that piece of time is at, so like the last quarter of the year.
When they would have time, is what you're saying, is towards that last
When
quarter?
I would have time.
Okay, perfect, sorry, thank you. That makes sense as well. You know, we could end up right back where we're at. I get that. I mean, we could end up saying GFOA is the best option out there. But when we are, you know, when we look at it, the $300,000, that really is not really subject in this portion of it, because that's dealing with once we get the RFP out there and everything. So that's a whole different process. But we are talking about $137,000.
Yes.
The services they provide seem to be very good, very thorough. You know, the question I have is one, is council ready to say, you know what, if we're going to push this back, we also need to push back implementation date that we've kind of directed, because that's really where the push is at, where the time crunch is at there. So I mean, I think we should consider that, because that's going to only increase the stress on D and the finance department. So if we're going to ask for more time so we can develop an RFQ or an RFI, then we need to also understand that the reality is implementation of an ERP system would be beyond 2022. And we need to be okay with that portion of it. But at the same point, I would also say, you know what, if we could find a better service out there that's cheaper, you know, is that the best fiscally responsible way to move forward as well? So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm done.
Tom?
I won't support this motion. I think we need to take the 2 weeks and look at it. We've got a may cost, should cost not to exceed with dollars in it. We want a new ERP system or upgraded ERP system. I don't know what that is, so I don't know what I'm buying. So I'm not going to support this.
George?
Well, being a taxpayer that's sick and tired of their taxes going up every year, I cannot understand why we're willing to move forward with this when in 2 weeks we could find a better deal. You know, that's why citizens' taxes go up, because government is not being efficient. If we were being efficient and cared about our taxpayers, we'd see if we couldn't get a cheaper deal. And I think it's very possible we could. That's all I got. I can't support this.
George?
Yeah, as always, I always think about taxes and cost to citizens. I personally think we need to step back and maybe relook at some other places that maybe we can get guidance or advice from. I always like to have, like you said, more than one person that I acknowledge or get advice from. I think that just for the amount that it would cost the citizens is too much. So I would not be in favor of this as it's written.
Melvin?
Well, I'm not going to support this, but I think we need more than 2 weeks for these guys to do that, though. I mean, that's whatever it takes there. And you're saying 2022, is that the beginning of 2022 or the December?
She had stated it'd be the fourth quarter of 2022 for implementation of an ERP system. But that's obviously going to get pushed back because...
Well, I mean, I'd be willing to push back a little bit to get some more bids on this.
Tom?
I threw 2 weeks out there because this organization may be the best one in town. It may be who we need to go to, but I don't have enough information tonight to vote on it. That's the only reason my position's where it's at. And I would like to give Dee an opportunity to go pursue that, and in 2 weeks, if she comes back and says nothing's changed, then we're okay. But just take that opportunity to go see if there's anything else we can do. And we may end up with GFOA, I don't know. But I'd just like more information.
Jim?
Hey, there's just been enough questions tonight. I want to learn more about it too. Also, what I heard was it may steer us back to the GFOA software. I'm not a software professional, so I'll need the advice that you find too. But just enough questions. I don't want to put any timeline on it. When you feel comfortable with coming back with it, I'll be listening. John?
I feel the same as what Jim just said. I pressed my button initially because I felt like sending it back for 2 weeks. We need to get more guidance than that. They need to know what we want. What do you want them to do for the time period that you're giving it back to them? But I agree with Jim. I don't think we should give a time period. Go back and do some work and bring it back to us when you're ready. That's my opinion.
Ben?
So just for clarity reasons, we're saying we want to send it back. And John mentioned there, maybe outlining. I mean, the reason I don't think 2 weeks is going to work is because really what we're asking for is an RFI or an RFQ. Well, 2 weeks isn't going to be enough time to get all that information together and out and everything like that. So 2 weeks, it doesn't even seem feasible. What do we want her to go and what do we want Dee to go and do? Do we want her to go and find more companies and then solicit bids from them? Or do we want her to develop a true RFI that sends it out there? And then that's not a 2-week process. That's a long period of time to develop that. And then we still have to go through and send it back to Baker Tilly, send it to GFOA, send it to whatever new organizations we find. So I'm not saying, you know what, it sounds like we need to go through and really research this, but what is it that we truly want her to do? Do we just want her to come back in 2 weeks and say, I found a couple other organizations that do this and here's what they offer and give us a price? Or do we want her and staff to develop an RFI? And if we're doing an RFI, it's gonna have to go through the entire process. And that's not a short-term deal. So what are we asking? What is it that we're truly asking here?
I think it's established that we're not just giving her 2 weeks, that we're gonna give her whatever time she needs to, and then come back when she
But for an RFI, to develop an RFI, or just to come back with additional companies?
I'd say an RFI with 3 bids on it.
Well, I will say we can't dictate how many companies submit to that.
No.
But I mean, if we do an RFI, Sean, what's the general time frame when we look at RFIs? Not to develop it, but the process once it's sent out to close.
If I may, because RFI, RFP, RFQ, each one of them has a very distinct use for it. I haven't done RFIs before. If I can, I appreciate every council member up there wanting to take some time, take a pause, breathe, give us the room and the flexibility if we go into 2022 and it's not implemented. The one thing that I would like to clarify, and I'm not trying to sway anybody's vote one way or another, with a small community of 50 employees, she is the finance department. So when we sit there and talk and somebody comes up and says, hey, Wichita did this. Okay, now we're talking 1,500 employees. I don't even know how many are in the purchasing department. The IT department is probably 20, 30 individuals. We have one IT person. I'm not saying that we cannot do what Wichita can. We can. It just takes time where everything else is on the plate. We've got a tremendous amount of stuff that is all very positive going on here. If council is going to give Dee and myself time, we will research. We're not pushing back on that. I will work with the gentleman that spoke tonight and get with him. This is the way that we normally do it on a smaller case basis. You go out and benchmark. You figure out other communities that have put some time and effort into it and said, how did this person treat you? We know GFOA is a gold standard. We know that they're not a profit organization, that they're not sitting there trying to take advantage. When one council member says, I'm not really certain what we're buying is a consultant to let us know what we need to buy. Because when she talks about interoperability, we're looking at a software program that can interact with our code enforcement department, interact with our public works department, interact with our utility billing department, interact with our building permit department. So there's interoperability. We all know Windows, but we don't know. We've all dealt with Encode over the last decade. Some of our employees are just sitting there thinking that is absolutely the worst thing in the world, in code 9. In the previous community I came from, we had in code 9, and people seemed to like it. So one of the first things that we wanted them to do is maybe take a look at our staff. Is it a matter of that we were not properly trained at the time, or we've had employee turnover that we need to get them trained, and what we have is good? But we need professional consultant to help us with that because of the fact everything else that this staff is trying to accommodate to keep all the balls up in the air, that's what this was for. But if council is willing on slowing it, throttling back a little bit to give us the time, 2 weeks, month, whatever, we will come back to you saying, hey, we've researched this, we've researched this. I don't think that we need a formal guidance or direction to say, do this under this time period. We've heard you loud and clear of what your expectations are, and we will just provide progress reports and let you know what the hurdles are that we come up against along the way, if that's okay.
Tom?
My 2 weeks is for status. If it
Yes, sir.
takes a month, it takes a month.
Yes,
I
sir.
would like for you to go look at something and say what we did makes sense or what we did doesn't make sense, and
Be happy to.
and massage it to however we need to do it. So that's all I'm asking.
Yes, sir.
So if I heard right, and Dee, you can help clarify if I did not, but, so part of the possibility with this GFOA, or another one if we were used, is that we might find that a new tax software system or a new ERP system might not necessarily be needed. It might be an issue of training. Now, we don't want to hand tie that, obviously, because then we get all excited that we don't need to spend, but the reality is that we could. But that could be, that's part of what we're looking at when we're talking about this consulting firm, is the fact that maybe it's a training issue from is it Tyler Technologies that owns NCAT? So maybe that's the issue there as well. I would suggest that we, and I agree with Melvin here on this, is that maybe not a specific time frame to it. But I would say maybe first we need to find out what additional companies are out there to some degree. And then at that point, decide if an RFI is needed, or if, some of these companies just aren't even interested, so why go through that whole process if we know some of that's going to take place? So,
We'll be happy to do that.
but I also believe that council needs to be okay with saying that 2022 might not be the implementation date of a new ERP system, and I don't want to put that constraint on you all either.
Because I'm not trying to indicate that this is completely uncharted territory, that we don't have any background or experience in the software. We do. Each one of us have dealt with it over several years. But again, when you're out trying to buy a car, you don't know what you don't know. And if you've never bought one of the cars before, that's what we're looking at. Under GFOA's proposal, $137,500, again, they gave a typical city of our size, ranges anywhere between $40,000 and $75,000 just for the implementation phase, which is the very critical part at the very end. Call it training wheels, if you will. We may need training wheels only for a week and our staff picks it up, or we may need training wheels a little bit longer. So it's an unknown at this point in time, and regardless of how much information we get and whichever consultant we go to, if we go that direction, none of them are going to be able to say it's going to cost this, because they haven't had a chance to interact with our staff to know what their capabilities are and where they need to fill in. So, but we'll be happy to bring it back to council.
I guess I'd call the question then.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
And that motion is 1-7. That brings us to item 8, which is discuss and consider approving a contract with Wichita Homeworks to reconstruct 8 ADA sidewalk ramps at 61st Street and I-135 intersection. Simon?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just making sure this is working. I think it is. Back on September 14th, when discussing the recommended options for the 2021 Pedestrian and Connectivity Plan, staff was directed to research the cost of installing ADA sidewalk crossings along 61st Street and the on and off ramps of I-135. Staff reached out to several concrete contractors We provided all the same information, all three contractors, and Wichita Homeworks turned in their bid at the lowest, which was $8,851.20. The attached bid quote is to remove the existing curb section and sidewalk, to place tapered ADA-specific curbs and install 8 ADA sidewalk street approach ramps. Public Works will provide the 8 ADA-compliant tactile pads that will be installed by the contractor at the time of the concrete placement. Please note that the approval is really dependent on this next agenda item that I have for traffic control, because this is a KDOT project, and I'll have to have a permit that requires a traffic control plan.
Tom?
I hit Simon pretty hard before the meeting because of the trying to track through this thing and follow up to see who was low bidder and who wasn't, and what they had in it and what they didn't have in it. And I asked him in the future if he would provide us a spreadsheet, and he said he's got one, it just didn't get in there. So I'm going to make a motion that, let me find it. Make a motion, move to approve the authorization to mayor to sign a contract with Wichita Homeworks for the reconstruction of 8 ADA sidewalk ramps at 61st Street and I-135 intersections in the amount of $8,851.20 to be paid out of the Special Streets and Highway Fund.
Jim?
I second that for discussion. Is it doing both sides of 61st Street, or which side?
That is correct. So there's 2 on-ramps, 2 off-ramps, northbound and southbound. Each on and off ramp has 2 sidewalk intersections where it ties into that road. So that would be 8 ramps that would need to be constructed. The way the sidewalk is right now is it just goes to a regular standard curb face with a drop off. And if you need ADA requirements, you just can't make it up that curb. I mean, we're talking a standard 9-inch curb back or to try to get up. So this would fix that to make it more accessible to people in wheelchairs or that have that need that cross those interstate ramps.
Okay, so this would enable people to get from hydraulic all the way across interstate?
That's correct.
Or under interstate?
Yes.
Do we have any others we need to worry about on the way to Leakers, or did we get them all?
Well, we're going to be doing the roundabout, and that's going to address some of those issues as well with that roundabout project at 61st and Broadway. So there's going to be some ongoing construction along that avenue here pretty soon as well. And hopefully they'll get those squared away too.
Perfect, thank you.
So does this one cover the one like on the new bridge there? Because she had mentioned to me that there's one to get on where the new bridge was in that didn't have.
Right, and I think that's there on that off-bound ramp of that southbound lane, am I correct?
Okay.
So Mayor and Council, that's Miss James. She's a resident of Park City, and she utilizes those sidewalks a lot. I've met with her before about this issue, and we did some adjustments to the crosswalk timing and just trying to work on a few things to make it a little bit more accessible for people to get down these sidewalks. We want everybody to be safe and be able to get to where they need to be. But she is correct. On the south side of 61st Street, the sidewalk does end over there, and there would not be a way. It'd have to be a crosswalk across Broadway, or across 61st Street to get to the other side, to the north side of 61st, and that's not in there. Now, future plans, we'll probably run some sidewalk down the south side of 61st as well and bring it into that roundabout area on Broadway and be able to tile that in the future. So.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 8-0. That brings us to item 9, which is discuss and consider approving the contract with Wilson and Sons, Inc., to provide traffic control during the reconstruction of 8 ADA sidewalk ramps at 61st Street and 135 intersections.
Last agenda back in September, we discussed and recommended the options for the 2021 pedestrian connectivity plan, and we were directed to research and find the costs associated with installing ADA ramp crossings at 61st and I-135. A total of the 8 ADA sidewalk ramps would be required, and being within the Kansas Department of Transportation KDOT right away, it will require permitting. A traffic control plan will be necessary to apply for the permit. Sillis & Sons Incorporated will provide a traffic control plan and will perform all installation advanced warning signage and traffic control items as required by the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the METCD.
I would make a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a contract with Sillison & Sons Incorporated for traffic control in the amount of $1,923 to be paid out of the Special Street and Highway Fund.
Tom?
Second it.
Motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 8-0. That brings us to item 10, discuss and consider approving the contract with SmithCon LLC to construct 3 pickleball courts in Happy McLean Park. Simon?
On February 23rd, council approved the quote from Versa Sports to construct 3 pickleball courts in Happy McLean Park for the total cost of $20,900. The original contract included a mill and overlay of the asphalt, installing nets and painting 3 pickleball courts over the existing tennis courts. In July, Versa Sports submitted an update or increase of the quote. They include options of staying with the asphalt for $30,765 or switching to concrete, which would be $46,297. Staff worked with Versa Sports to honor their original quote, but after numerous attempts to schedule the work and several correspondences back and forth, we've determined that Versa Sports is either unable or unwilling to complete the project as approved and has since regrouped and sought additional bids. Staff reached out to several concrete contractors and received 3 responses, with SmithCon LLC being the low bidder at $23,820. This bid is only to perform the concrete portion of the court. Staff would remove the existing fences and the asphalt, and then the installation of nets and painting of the court would be completed on a separate project, most likely by Multicon Construction, who recently completed the Senior Center's pickleball. If this is passed tonight, they told me that they could probably start construction or doing this concrete work within the next 2 weeks. So it's going to happen pretty quick, which is something that we've been fighting for a long time.
George?
Yeah, I know there were concerns about the fence around the pickleball court by the senior center. Has that been accomplished, or are we still working on that? Or?
I believe that's finished. I had an update that the fencing did come in. Whether it got completed or not, I'm not 100% sure on, but I can check in on that.
You have somebody putting that in? Is there that you contracted out for?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On the pickleball courts, what do you think the cost is going to be? I know you were talking about this just for the concrete to put in. What's going to be the cost for the rest of it and the Multicon? What's that? What are you appraising that cost at?
That's an excellent question. We're looking at probably around $5,000 to $5,500, $5,000 to $5,500 to paint all 3 and install the nets. So
you have the manpower to do that?
That would be a contract for they would come out and paint the courts. It would match what's at the senior center, essentially. So it'll look just like the senior center courts would, and they'll come out and they know what they're doing. They're really good at it. So let them go and paint it and put the nets up, and everything will be just the way it's supposed to be.
So in conjunction with the fencing you have around the senior center, you're saying you're taking the fence down at where you're going to put it, or do you?
Yes. Right now, we don't look to reuse the fencing that's up there to replace it at this time. It's something that we can address later. We haven't really looked at that. The reasoning behind the fencing at the senior center, I think, was more of a concern for the cars. The tennis court is not by parking, so I don't know if we'll have the same issues or not there that we have at the senior center.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
George asked one of my questions about the fencing, and I know wind affects it too, so there may be something in the future. You don't have any idea how much that's going to cost?
The fencing around it, I don't have any prices on that yet, no, sir.
John?
I was just gonna say, he mentioned it, but the fencing, it will need fencing up there at that one too, but, and then probably lighting as well, but there's already it's already stubbed out for electricity and everything, so it's kind of ready to go. That's it.
Ben?
Yeah, I know this is something that staff and the park board has been working on for quite a while, and obviously we couldn't have predicted the problems or the issues, I guess I should say, with Versa on this. But this is something that's been a year and a half or so in the process between the park board getting a hold of it and recommending it there. And so thank you for staying on top of this and for trying to push this forward. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a contract with SmithCon LLC for 3 pickleball courts in the amount of $23,820 to be paid out of the general funds park department.
Melvin?
I'll second that for discussion there. So we're looking at what, $30,000 there just for the flat work?
Yeah,
concrete,
roughly.
And you're gonna take out the fencing, take out the asphalt, I guess, with our backhoe or our front loader?
Yeah, we'll
Whatever.
take it out with the backhoe, we'll remove that fencing, and then probably just store it at the old plant.
And
until
is
we
it gonna be
figure
the same size as the tennis court now?
No, it's gonna be larger.
A bit
It'll be larger because we're putting in 3 pickleball courts, so it's 55.5 feet by 101 feet.
John?
I noticed yesterday in the newspaper, there was an article about Wichita spending $300,000 for a consultant to design their pickleball complex down at South Lakes. But they're spending $3 million on their pickleplex is what they're calling it. And then there's gonna be additional ones added at Clapp Park. So it's a growing sport.
All right, got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That motion passes 7-1.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Jim?
Closing remarks, I don't know, it's been troublesome to me to watch what's been going on the last couple of meetings. There's been anger and accusations, and it just, I'm up here to listen, and I want to hear everybody's thoughts, but I want it presented with some decorum. You know, when you're being angry or even possibly slanderous, you lose your audience a little bit. So I would just ask for that in the future, that we proceed that way.
Brandy?
So we're professionals. We're elected to do and to represent the city and do what's best for the city. Over the last year, we've done a really good job with discussions, having conversations, essentially agreeing to disagree. We're not always going to agree, and that's what's great about this council is we can have these conversations and we can discuss and be professional about it and be courteous to each other. With that, the attacks, the comments, the accusations that have been thrown out towards our staff, towards other elected members of this council, have become embarrassing. The attacks are based on emotions and not on really significance. And it's affecting not only us up here working together as a council, it's affecting the city, it's affecting our employees. We look ridiculous right now in the public's eye. And to me, I don't appreciate that. I've been left out of the loop out of a lot of things. There's lots of conversations that are happening behind the scenes. I've heard about them, I've witnessed them, and I think it's ridiculous what's going on. Like I said, in the public's eye, we look stupid. Look how many people we have in the audience tonight. Are they here because they're ready to see another fight or another attack on our city staff? We need to grow up and be the professionals and be the elected officials we were put here by the public to be, and stop doing everything based on emotion. And I'm just, right now, it's sickening to me, and I just want to put that out there.
George?
November the 2nd is Election Day. It's one of the greatest freedoms or rights we have in this country, and I would encourage everyone to go out and vote. Pick your leaders. That's your responsibility. If you don't go out and vote, then you got no right to complain. That's all I got.
Tom?
I don't have anything tonight.
Melvin?
I don't have anything.
Yeah, I did get a chance to go out to the Vietnam Moving Wall Memorial, and it was very great to be out there. I do want to give a shout out to our Register of Deeds, Tanya Buckingham, who was out there during the week doing services for our veterans, helping file GD 214s, and then as well as veterans discount cards. So I want to say thank you to her and to the staff who gave of their time. I know that they were employed, so I mean, but we're out there working hard. I'll also want to say thank you to Terry and those of the VFW and the Legion for the hard work that they put into making this event happen. It was a great event if you got a chance to go out there to that event. So thank you all for your hard work. And then just as a reminder to that, we'll have a meeting in between now and then, but November 11th is our Veterans Day. And it's a great opportunity to recognize those men and women who have served valiantly. I also want to say thank you. I know she's not in here right now, but to Dee, I know that Dee put a lot of hard work into item number 7, and I appreciate that very much on the council. I know that each one is doing their best to provide the information. Sometimes we just need more information, and that's not a bad thing, and nor is staff complaining that that's a bad thing. But I do want to say thank you for the work that was put into that.
George?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that came out for our Fall Festival. I thought we had a good crowd this year, a lot of kids. Also want to thank the donors who donated to our Fall Fest. Also the Community Relations Board, Brandy, for coming out and the volunteer work that she did. I thought it was encouraging to see the city come together in that respect at our Fall Fest. The unity is something I think we can get back. I think we need that in this council. If nothing else, let's do it for the citizens of Park City. And as always, November 2nd, I encourage everybody to get out and vote and let your voice be heard. Thank you.
John?
I'd mention too, the Fall Festival was very successful, great turnout, great weather, and a lot of people had a great time. That's all I have.
Jim?
I would move that we adjourn.
And Ben?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes 8-0.
Do you want me to those?
Huh?
Want me